Today on Riffs, Beards, and Gear, we talk about the history of the Gibson RD. One of my favorite, if not my all-time favorite guitars is the Gibson RD, the original one from the 70s. And for a long time, there was a lot of mystery surrounding these guitars as they were only made for a couple of years, beginning in 1977 till about 1982, although the 1982 models were really just leftover models from the model year 1981. So let's start at the very beginning of the inception of the Gibson RD. Now the RD stands for Research and Development, and at the time, Gibson's parent company was a company called Norlin, who were famous and are still famous for their cost-cutting measures they did, for example, the pancake bodies to the Les Pauls of the day, but they were always looking to try new things to potentially turn a new profit. And another company that Norlin owned was Moog synthesizers. So they thought, well, let's do a new guitar body and let's throw some Moog circuitry in that guitar because synthesizers are becoming really, really popular with that newfangled new wave music, and we'll make millions of dollars, right? So Norlin tasked Bob Moog to design a circuit specifically for their new RD guitar. Now, the RD came in 3 different models, ranging from the RD Standard, which I also have here. This is a 77 RD Standard. There was also the RD Custom and then the RD Artist, which was the top of the line for the RD style guitars. Now, upon the release in 1977, the RD's 3 models started with the RD Standard at $699, the RD Custom was $759, and then the RD Artist was $859. Now, the RD Standard came with just a regular Gibson style 4-knob control style with a 3-way selector switch. The RD Custom came with binding on the neck, dot inlays, little fancier. It had a variation of the Moog electronic circuit with a toggle, with a 2-way toggle. And then the RD Artist came with something pretty interesting. It came with global volumes for each of the pickups, and then it came with a bass and treble control, and then the selector switch. You had the 3-way selector pickup switch, and then you had what Gibson called a trick switch. Now you had a compression expansion switch on the front, so that added a compressor on the neck pickup and an expander on the bridge pickup, which is kind of wild. The compressor compressed the neck sound, but the expander on the bridge is pretty wild and unusual. And then all the way back, you had a bass and treble, or a treble boost, as it were. It was shrill, and there was a lot of top end because the pickups that came with the RD Artist were very, very low impedance, very low output pickups. Some of them have been measured less than 4K, which is nuts. Now, my RD Artist, it was all original when I got it, and it was shrill and horrible sounding, and I did what most owners did at that time. I ripped out the electronics and had it wired like a Les Paul, because I can do that because it's my guitar. But it was a very quirky, very unusual wiring set for any guitar, really, let alone a Gibson. Now, comparing this at the time to the retail price of $799 for a regular run-of-the-mill Gibson Les Paul Standard, these were quite expensive and nobody bought them. Nobody really cared, and it's thought that fewer than 2,000 of them over the entire line, guitars and basses, were produced, but I have never been able to verify that number. They are certainly rare though. What's interesting about my 2 guitars is my Standard, being the baseline model, is amazing. Rosewood fretboard. This was an all original guitar when I got it. The bridge was basically rotted out and it was caving in. I had to replace that. I have replaced the pickups, and I did have to replace the tuners, although I do still have the originals. I got the exact Schaller modern equivalents. However, the tuners were shot, they were worn out, they were no good. But otherwise, This is a totally original guitar, and the fit and finish on it is incredible. Then you have something like the top of the line RD Artist, and you have things like, the cutoff dowel pins in the body of this guitar, which, is weird. I don't have that on the RD Standard. Now, this leads me to believe that this particular guitar was possibly originally meant to be painted either black or tobacco burst or something like that, as I have seen those finished guitars, like at Norm's Rare Guitars, and you can feel where the dowel pins are, and they would have no reason to cosmetically touch those up if they were just gonna paint over them. They did not do that with my RD Artist. There is also a huge finished over nick in the back of the headstock. The quality on my RD Artist was nowhere near what it is on the RD Standard of the same year. I guess this is a Friday guitar and my RD Standard is a Wednesday guitar, I don't know. So going back to the 70s, Gibson tried to get these in the hands of players to little to no success. Jimmy Page is documented as using a natural finish RD Artist at one Led Zeppelin concert of the day. And then I also saw the bass player for Flock of Seagulls use an RD bass in the Iran video. And that is literally it. That's all I could find. That's the only people that I ever saw play these at the time. Now, something cool worth noting is the Gibson RD had a 25.5-inch scale upon its launch in 1977. This isn't totally uncommon for Gibson, although normally all of their guitars are the 24.75 scale that you would see on something like a Les Paul, assuming that the lack of sales were due to the weird body shape. Sometime in '79, Gibson shortened the scale of these RDs to the regular standard Gibson scale of 24.75, and they also started doing things like adding a TP6 tailpiece and adding additional finishes. And then towards the end of the run, about 1981, you saw some weird variations, like one with a Victory headstock and another CMT edition. They were just really trying to get these to sell. They did not sell, so instead, they put the RD Moog electronics in Les Pauls and ES335s, which was even weirder. Now, after having killed off the series in 1982 officially, you didn't see much from the Gibson RD, and I myself wasn't even aware that it was a guitar. I was familiar with Chris Novoselic, and I was a huge Nirvana fan in the 90s, but as far as I knew, these were only basses until I found Tony Bacon's fantastic 1991 book, The Ultimate Guitar Book, in which is pictured a black and gold Gibson RD, and I was floored. Now, for me personally, the Gibson RD is the perfect love child between a Gibson Explorer and a Gibson Firebird, and I just think it is so elegant looking, and I love offset guitars, and I also love how heavy they are. They are just incredibly robust feeling. Both my guitars weigh 12 to 13 pounds. This one is definitely lighter than my standard. My standard is about 13 pounds. This is almost 12 pounds, which is pretty heavy. Now, one of the most famous users, if not the most famous user ever for a Gibson RD, is the Foo Fighters' Dave Grohl, who used an RD Standard in Tobacco Burst on tour, and then he took it with him in the studio and used it for most of the tracks on the Foo Fighters' Color and the Shape record, simply turning down the volume control to get a pseudo clean tone, as heard, for example, in the intro to Everlong. Now, entering into the 2000s, you kind of saw a little bit of a boost in popularity for the general RD shape, in that First Act at the time in the mid-2000s were making very high quality custom shop guitars, and their Delgado model was kind of reminiscent of a Gibson RD, and it was a pretty cool looking guitar. And then you had bands like Ghost, who really were spearheading the Gibson RD movement and were using modern custom shop reissues of the Gibson RD. And incidentally, they were never endorsed by Gibson. They were simply just given a couple of guitars from Gibson as a, here you go, use these, we support what you do kind of fashion, which is pretty cool. But all of the modern iterations have been of the short scale version of the RD, and they have never really been true to spec with the original 70s versions. For example, all the reissues put the output jack on the side of the body, not on the front as the originals were. Now today, you can find RDs on websites like eBay and Reverb. Sometimes they are very competitively priced. Other times, the sellers are out of their complete minds. But you can find originals and reissues just the same right next to each other if you are interested in checking out the Gibson RD. These are going up in value a little bit. It kind of is all over the place. I got my 1977 Standard out of the back of a Volkswagen bus in 2015 for, I believe I paid $1,600 for it off Craigslist from a collector. Pretty random, but generally the vintage models, depending on the condition, I've seen for, about $2,000 to $2,500 depending. Now to wrap it all up, I really think the Gibson RD is a modern classic, and while they have reissued several times, starting in 2007, 2014, and I believe in 2018, they still haven't reissued a true to spec front input jack 25.5-inch scale RD, and I would love to see Gibson do something like that. Offer it in a natural finish, black finish, silver burst finish, whatever you want it to have. It would be so cool to see an original spec reissue from Gibson. But for now, we have the vintage models to tide us over. All the pickable links down below in the description. You've been wonderful. I've been Fluff. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. If you enjoyed the video that you just watched, please consider subscribing. It helps me, help you, and then in turn you get more stuff to watch. And also, I have all sorts of stuff down in the description of this video. Sweetwater giveaway stuff, there's all sorts of links to all sorts of things, so consider checking that out as well if you're gonna hang. But if you don't hang, all good. I still love you.